whole 9 yards. But all right. In the meantime, tonight's Gemara is on page 53, Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Okay, we're up to Halacha Hey. A person will recall that he was davening. He was in the middle of davening. The Nizkushu Balkari recalled that he was Balkari. Lo Yafsik, he shouldn't stop davening. Alikater, he should abbreviate his davening. He should daven quickly. Yorad Lidbo. Now you went down to the mikveh before sunrise, and the Mishnayos, if you recall, hold that it's preferable to read Shema before Neitzachama, the actual proper usage. It's preferable to read Shema before Neitzachama, the David Kavasikin and Tzvei Shmon Esrei at Neitzachama. So Im Yachol, if you can go down, lalos, if you can come up liskasos and cover yourself up properly, the likros, and read Shema Achlo Tonei Tzachama before sunrise occurs, then that's what you should do. Yalav Yiskasa. You should rise and cover yourself up. V'yikra, v'imlav, and if not, Yiskasa b'mayim, you should cover yourself in the water, v'yikra, and read Shema that way. Avol, however, lo Yiskasa a little bit mayim, roy, you should not cover yourself now with dirty water, v'lo b'mei mishra, nor with water used to soak flax. That's the assumption. Achiyato tochan mayim, until you pour in them water to dilute them so they're not disgusting. But how far do you have to distance yourself from them and from excrement? Arba amos. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Masnisa berabim. This is all talking about when you're b'tzibur, when you're davening with a minyan. Avo beino levenatzu, when you're davening on your own, b'yechidus, then no. Yafsik. Interrupt and finish davening after you go to the mikveh. In other words, go interrupt your davening, go to the mikveh because you're a balkari, and then finish davening afterwards. It's true. We'd rather you have the mile of davening b'tzibur than have the mile of davening when you're tahar. But if you're not davening b'tzibur anyway, so first go to the mikveh before you finish davening. Buram, however, ki Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yehuda, who we paskin like nowadays, who holds that we no longer are makbid on this tevila for carry. Afilu beino lebeinatzmo, if you're davening on your own, eino mafsik she'eino mayim litpo. You do not interrupt when you have no water nearby. Aviyesh lo mayim litpo, if you have water handy, in other words, you're right near a mikveh, something like that. After Rabbi Yehuda moida shu mafsik. Even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that you should interrupt your davening and go to the mikveh and continue afterwards. Chayla sheshimish mitaso. What about a person who's sick, who had relations with his wife, and it's too cold for him to go to the mikveh because he's sick? He wasn't too sick to have relations, but he's too sick to go to the mikveh. Rabbi said, you know what? If he caused himself to get in the situation by having relations, yitpol v'yamus. Let him go to the mikveh, let him die. Tough on him. He put himself in this situation. Tough. Says the Gemara. However, if not that he had relations intentionally, but he had an omission unintentionally, we don't make him go to the mikveh. In other words, the chayla is exempt from this tevila for carry. Rabbi Chagai said b'shem Rabbi Abba Bar Zavdi, ben kach u ben kach, regardless, even if he intentionally did it to himself by having had relations, we do not require him to go to the mikveh. If he's sick, we don't force him to do so. Now, chole margil, generally speaking, a sick person who has margil means accustomed himself, but here it means has intentionally made himself tamei by having had relations. Tisha kabin. He's got to go under the shower and have 9 kav of water poured upon him, which we said is the lesser degree of achieving, lesser way of achieving tahara from keri. Bari margil, and therefore a person who's healthy, who has brought this upon himself by having had relations, so he's got to go to a full-blown mikveh. Chole mionas, if he's a chole, he's a sick person, and he didn't bring it upon himself, but rather he had an emission, we don't force him to go all together. He doesn't even need 9 kav. Bari mionas, so a person who's healthy and it had an emission, then tzarich tisha kabin, he has to take the shower of 9 kabin before he can go ahead and learn and daven. Rabbi Zavdi braid Rabbi Yaakov bar Zavdi said b'shem Rabbi Yonah, said name Rabbi Yonah, Ir shemayona rachok. If you have a city which is where the mayon, in other words the mikveh, is distant from the city, harei zekari Shema, then you read the Shema first, because that's the Raisa. V'yored v'toivel, and you go down and you go to the mikveh subsequently, v'olim mitzbal, and then you daven afterwards. Now the assumption is that obviously you don't have you don't have that much time to daven. You don't have that much time to say Shema daven, because for davening you have an extra hour. So therefore, say Shema first, then go to the mikveh, and then come back and daven. Imu adam mesuyam, if a person is excessively large, mesuyam means specific, but that's a euphemism here. It's like portly. So if he's a portly person, so then even if the mikveh is near the city, also kemayan rachok, then it's as if the
somebody have a mercury links here. The lights are on? No?
It's as if the
a mercury stable over. I don't know.
What color is it?
I don't know. Somebody came in and said that you have mercury. Yeah.
Okay. Again, more than Mesuyim, if he's a large person, then also Kamayan Rachok, then even if the mikveh is right near the city, we regard it as if it's far away, and therefore he doesn't have to go down to the mikveh until after Shema, later on in the day before he goes to daven. Okay, new piska, new issue. Vim lav, if not, we said in the Mishnah, Vim lav, and if not, yiskasa b'mayim v'yikra. If he doesn't have enough time to come out and say Shema and cover himself up properly, then he covers himself with water and reads in the water. Masnis in our Mishnah story about Bachurim, where the water is dark, is muddied. However, Aval B'tzlulin, if it's not muddy, if it's clear, also it's forbidden because you can see the erva through the water. So then, of course, you're not considered to be covered up by the water. If you can muddy the waters by mixing your foot around down in the bottom of the pond or whatever it is, then yachor, you can do that, and that'll be sufficient in order to reach ma, because then you can't see the erva through the water. Okay? Tani, we learned, marchiki mitzvah adam, one must distance oneself from the excrement of a human being, arba amos, 4 amos in order to say Shema. Umitzvahs clothing for the excrement of dogs, arba amos, also 4 amos. Ubishashu naisin leoros. That's only, however, when that dog excrement is being put into tanning vats. They used to tan hides with dog excrement. So before it's put into the tanning vats, it doesn't smell so bad. However, once it's put in the tanning vat, it smells very bad, and then you have to distance yourself 4 amos from it. Okay? Now, Gemara is going to say 4 amos means from where the odor ends. Not because you might still be smelling it at the end of 4 amos. So you have to put yourself 4 amos from where the odor ends. Okay? Says the Gemara, but Rabbi Yerushalmi B'Shem Rabbi Zera said, Nevela shenitzucha. If you have a nevela, a dead carcass, which smells bad, also tzarech min arbam, so you have to distance yourself 4 amos from it. Okay, because of the bad smell. Rabbi Yavina said, wait a minute. Is that a chiddush? Rabbi Yirmi is saying, Umasnisa amrakain. Our Mishnah already said this. How far must you distance yourself from them and from the excrement? Arba amos. What's the from them? From anything which smells bad. So already know Nevela for our Mishnah. What's Rabbi Yirmi telling us which you don't know already? Rabbi Shammai. I don't think the Samor appears anywhere in the Bavli. Rabbi Shammai. We have Beis Shammai. We have Shammai the Tana, but I don't think there's ever a Shammai in the Bavli. Rabbi Yami, Rabbi Shammai, Tipoter b'mishur shel kovsim. You know what? Could be it's different. Could be that our Mishnah is talking about where it's not about something which smells bad, waters which smell bad. May Mishra is waters in which you have bad smelling excrement because you're doing they used to use also excrement as detergent. Dog excrement was all purpose kind of stuff, so it's used also for detergent. So when it's so his kasha Rabbi Yirmiyah was Gemara's kasha Rabbi Yirmiyah is that what you said that something that smells bad. You have to distance yourself for no for our Mishnah because our Mishnah says you have to distance yourself from May Mishra for Amos, right? So it says Gemara, no, maybe that May Mishra is talking about something else. Maybe that May Mishra is talking about where they're working in the river, and since they're working in the river, they're actually soaking stuff. So you have to distance yourself for Amos from there in order that they shouldn't make you wet, nor they shouldn't distract you, right? Nor that you shouldn't interfere with their work. So maybe it doesn't have directly to do with the problem of bad smell. Amalei Rabbi Mohanan, Rabbi Mohanan said, "Nah, not a good answer." It was talking about, indeed, Mishra Shokovsin, about a launderer soaking, and that the question had to do with not to disturb them. That's a separate statement in our Mishnah. Hataninon lo b'mayim aroyim v'lo b'mei Mishra. You might say that Mei Mishra is referring to the soaking of the laundry. I shouldn't stand near there because it's going to be a distraction. But then what does mayim royim mean? What is bad water? It must be that the badness of the water, when we say the word mayim roim, implies that we're talking about a case not only where there are distractions involved, but also where there are issues of bad smells involved. So the kash remains Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah is not saying any greater chiddush than our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said we're saying that smells bad, you have to distance yourself. Our Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah, is not saying any greater chiddush than that. And of course, Kedarko Shel Yerushalmi, we leave such a question up in the air and we do not resolve it, and we go on to another issue. Tani, we learned, Katon Sheyachol Lechol Kazayis Dogon. A child, this is of course a well-known halacha from the Bavli as well. A katan who can eat a kazayis of grain, parshimitzo also. We must distance ourselves from his excrement, umimei meraglav from his urine arba amos. V'imeno yochel lechol kazayis dog, and if he's not yet old enough to eat a kazayis of grain, ein porshim lo mitzo also. One does not have to distance oneself, not from his excrement, v'lo mimei meraglav, nor from his urine, da'od amos 4 amos. Bon kumei Rabbi Avur. So,
from a baby's diaper, so is it such an issue?
If the baby's diaper smells, you have to distance yourself 4 amos in the end of the smell. If it's covered, it's not a problem. If the diaper is covered, it's not a problem unless it smells. Okay? That's what we're going to come to later on. When you see at the bottom of Chof Chesam now, we're going to discuss about when you see the tzoa. Here we're talking about when you smell it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Right. It's only after they can start eating grain. That's what we're talking about here. Right. Nursing babies. And here we're talking about solely about smell, not about line of sight. That's going to be a separate issue.
What about male blind?
It seems that the urine of a child before it begins to eat grain doesn't have a bad smell to it. It's only after the child begins to eat grain. That's what it says here. Says the Gemara. I'm not sure if that's in the Bavli. I think it also says Meiragov there, but I don't know offhand. I don't recall offhand. But that's definitely the end of the sugya in the Bavli. Now the Yerushalmi goes into a little bit more of a discussion of that. It says more bon kal kume Rabbi Avua. They asked for Rabbi Avua. Why do we distance ourselves from his excrement and from his urine? It says more amazing thing. Amar Lun, he said to us, because he has bad thoughts. The moment he can start eating grain, he has bad thoughts. And that impacts upon the smell of the odor of his urine and of his excrement. Amrin lay, so they said to him, we said to him, look, isn't he a little kid? What kind of bad thoughts can a little kid have? Amar alone, he said to us, V'lo ksiv, does it not say, Ki yetzer lev adam ramin urav? That the heart, the yetzer hara of an individual is bad from his youth? So it means from the time he's very young, from the time he can eat grain. Rabbi Yehuda said, if that's the case, you should even have to distance yourself from younger children's urine and excrement, because minu'urav ksiv. What does minu'urav mean? Mishoshu ninar lotzislam, once he starts shaking and moving inside to come out into the air of the world. So we see here that if that's the case, we should have to distance ourselves from their excrement and from the urine, even from a younger age. And again, since this is the Yerushalmi, the sugya ends abruptly here without any answer. The halacha is not like that. The halacha is you only have to distance yourself from the urine and excrement of the child once he becomes old enough to eat grain.
So the Yerushalmi never employs the term teku or anything like that?
No, never. I believe the word teku never appears in the Yerushalmi. It might have been interpolated by later, scribes, but it was solely it's a Bavli phrase. Okay, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Amar Yossi Bar Chanina said, "Marchiki miglole behema arba amos." But you have to distance yourself from the excrement of an animal 4 amos. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yitzchak Amar berakim. It's only if the excrement is soft. Uvad b'shel chamar, only if it's donkey excrement. I guess that smells particularly bad. And Rachia b'rabba amar b'bom min haderech, if the donkey had just come back from a long trip, because then its excrement smells really bad. Levi amar, marachiki mitzvah chazir, you have to distance yourself from the excrement of a pig, arba amos. V'tani kain, we learned this in the Bryce as well. Marachiki mitzvah chazir arba amos, from the excrement of a pig, and mitzvah nemoya from the excrement of a weasel, arba amos, and nemoya arba amos. Mitzvah nektani golim arba amos, and for the excrement of a rooster or a hen, 4 amos. Rabbi Yossi Bar Avun b'shem Rabbi Huna said, Uchuna said, bilvad badumim, only red ones. So Shiloh, what red ones means here? Does it mean red roosters or hens, or red excrement? So the Mefarshim go both directions. If you see red roosters or red excrement, you should be machmir. Okay? Says Tani, marchikim, this is the point which I told you before. Marchikim mireach ra arba amos. We distance ourselves from the bad smell, arba amos. Rabbi Yami misof reach ra arba amos. From the end of the area where the smell is, from there you go further 4 amos. Ha darli amar di amar. Now that's only talking about that which we said this hada, this damar that we said lacharav is where the tzoa is behind you. Avalafana, but it's in front of you. Ad mokum shade of rose. Line of sight is much worse. Even if you can't smell it, if you can see it, it's bad. Okay? Says the Gemara. Okay, like the following case. An interesting halacha. Rabbi Laya v'chevraya. Rabbi Laya and his friends. Hava yasvin kume pundika. They were sitting in front of the motel. They were at their Motel 6, and they were sitting at one of those chairs outside, Beramsha in the dark. Amrin, and they asked the Shaila, Mao Meimar Milai Doraisa. Well, we're sitting here having a good time. Can we talk Torah? So he said, Amr alone, he said no. He said to us, "Became a di'ilu hava b'yamama." Since if it were daytime, having chamyon ma kuminon, we would see that which is in front of us. I guess there was an outhouse right in front of them, but since it was dark, they couldn't see it and they couldn't smell it. So, nevertheless, he said that which is dark doesn't take away from the prohibition. In other words, if it's in the line of sight, regardless of whether you can actually see it, it's prohibited to learn Torah in that location. And therefore, again, since it was the day Hadir Chamion, we would see Makumino, what's before us, Beram, however, or there, here meaning therefore, Kidon Aser, now it's Aser as well. Okay? Tani, we learned, Grav Shorei, if you have a bucket full of excrement, a graf echot sharei, one bucket full of excrement. Graf, a bucket. Echot sharei, whether it is of excrement, ve'echot shamayim, or whether it's of urine. Tzarich larkin menu arba amos. You have to distance up 4 amos from it. V'shalifnei amita. However, if it's in front of the bed, in other words, I guess the bedpans they used at night or the chamber pots, were not as disgusting as a regular bucket full of urine or excrement, and therefore no mayin kosher yikra. As long as you put a little bit of water into that urine to dilute it, you can read Shema in its presence. V'im lav, and if not, al yikra. You shouldn't read Shema in its presence. How much? Rabbi Zakkai said, no san lusocho revius maim. If you put a revius, which is depending on, that's the same amount used for kiddush, right? 3 ounces, 4 ounces, 5 ounces, depending on which shiur you accept. No san lusocho revius maim. If you put within it the shiur revius of water, yikra, then you could read the Shema in its presence, or to learn or daven. V'im lav, and if not, al yikra, you cannot. Umau kidei revius. And what does it mean kidei revius? Now the next 3 words everybody has a lot of difficulty with. So here I'm going to use the Ridbaz, not just because he was the chief rabbi of Chicago, but because he's the easiest shot to use. Can you imagine that? Think about that for a minute. There's a parish on the side of the Gemara in the Yerushalmi, written by somebody who's actually the chief rabbi in Chicago. Isn't that an amazing concept? So, what?
Must have been a long time ago when he was chief rabbi.
Well, it was in 1915. It wasn't so long ago. Yeah, so in any event, says the Gemara, Ma'u Kedei Revius, Revius Besoch Revius. By the way, the reason why he became chief rabbi is because he went broke publishing this Yerushalmi. So he had to come to America to pay off his chayvus. So he had a salary back then of $3,000 a year. It was an amazing salary. So that's what he said. That's why he came here. So in any event, Ma'u Kedei Revius. What does it mean Kedei Revius? Revius Besoch Revius. It means for each revius of urine which you have in the for each revius of urine you have in the chamber, in the bedpan, you put in a revius of water. So a dilution of 1 to 1 is sufficient in order to reach Shema in the presence of this bedpan. Okay. Says Echo Klikoto, Echo Klikoto makes a difference if it's a big pan or a little pan. You need the ratio of 1 to 1. If it's behind the bed, you can say Shema. Because you're in front of the bed.
That's a ridiculous statement.
Who? Why?
As to the size of the pot.
It makes no difference how big the pot is.
But of course it makes no difference. Who cares about the size of the pot? All we care about is the contents. Because you're saying no matter the size of the pot, you need a ratio of 1 to 1.
Right. Yeah.
All we care about is the ratio. What's the difference? It's like, why would I even think of saying the size of the pot? I don't care about the difference of the size of the pot. All I'm focusing is on the substance that's in the pot.
I hear it. So that's a good question. It's probably a good question on the Ridbaz. I'll tell. That's why the Pnei. I'll tell you, since you don't like the Ridbaz, I'll tell you the Pnei Moshe's pshat. It doesn't bother me that much to ask. I have to tell you, because actually it could be the Gemara just it said we're not looking at the size of the keli, we're looking at dilution, and the Gemara expressed it that way by saying revius. So revius, it doesn't matter the size of the keli. So you're right, it's extraneous. It goes without saying, but that's just Gemara's way of expressing itself. Yeah. So but the Pnei Moshe says the pshat is that it doesn't matter. Adrab, he says there's a big chiddush here, that it doesn't matter how much urine there is in the pot and how big the pot is, as long as you poured a symbolic amount of revius in it. That's sufficient. So that's how he learns this line. Again, it's a big chiddush. Okay, according to him, the revius is static. If you have a pint of urine or a gallon of urine, all you need to pour in is a revius of water. I like to read Bazar Pshat is better. It's more rational to me. What? He kind of glosses over that. That's why in that Pnei Moshe has a klomar. Now, the way he learns it is that revius or besoch revius means he learns it as 2 different statements. Either you pour revius of water into the urine, or you urinate on into a pot which already had a revius of water in it. So it's either revius or besoch revius. You understand how Pnei Moshe's learning it? Okay. That's the beautiful thing about Yerushalmi. You have a lot of lines like this which you can learn any way you want. Yerushalmi gives you much more creativity than Bavli. Yes?
Can we just cover it up?
What?
cover it up.
You could cover it with a sheet or something. That's true. But here we're talking about a case, I guess, where they didn't have something to cover it up with. But that's what the Gemara is making, the next point. So the Gemara says, if you're in front of the bed and it's in front of the bed, then that's bad, right? Where am I here? If it's behind the bed and you're in front of the bed, it's okay. If, however, it's in front of the bed and you're in front of the bed, lo yikra, you shouldn't read Shema. It's not clear if Shimon Gamliel is arguing on the previous Gemara, or like you're suggesting, what the previous Gemara is giving one eitzah to put in a revius of water, and there's another eitzah to put it in a way where you can't see it. Okay? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, "Afilu traklin gadol traklin, even a great hall." Right? You all know Olam Hazeh Domela Prosta, Olam Ba Domela Traklin. This world is like a hall, it's like an antechamber. The next world is like a great banquet hall. What was the size of the great banquet hall in the times of Yerushalmi? Eser al Eser! 10 amos by 10 amos. This huge room, right? That's it. The Traklin is 10 amos by 10 amos. It's approximately 15 or 20 feet by 15 or 20 feet, right? So even if it's a big hall like that, and there's in one corner of the room, there's a bedpan, you shouldn't read Shema on the other side of the room. Lo yikra, achi chaseno, until, like you suggest, you cover it, or you put it under a bed. There are trains nowadays. Amtrak has sleepers in which you have a toilet in the sleeping room. It's underneath your chair, and when you want to attend your needs, you pick up your chair and you use the toilet. So this, in fact, I think that would be considered tachas hamita, and that would therefore be okay. You would be able to say Shema or daven in the room when it was covered. Okay? Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yaakov Barach B'Shem Rabbi Chia Barva said, Hore Rabbi Chanina Tarte. Rabbi Chanina said you have to do both. Kehada to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. In other words, both you have to. I'm misleading you, by the way. The word Tarte here is also a subject of great debate. What does the word Tarte mean? According to Pnei Moshe, Tarte means the city where Rabbi Chanina comes from. According to another interpretation, it means both Rabbi Chia Barva and Rabbi Chanina were both Moreh. They both paskin, Rabbi Shimon like Rabbi Shimon that has to be covered. Another way of interpreting, which I recall correctly from the Mashbiach, is that he paskin, you have to do both things. You have to pour in some water, and you have to cover it. Like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, you have to do both.
Aren't you spelled with a hay? That's unusual.
No, it is spelled with a hay. You're thinking of Tarvayu, which is a same meaning. Oh no, you're right. It's spelled usually without a hay at the end. That's correct. Yeah, that's probably why Pnei Moshe says it's a place name, because it's spelled with the hay at the end. That's what gives it that. But the truth is, we have so little knowledge. It's entirely possible that the scribes messed it up with Yerushalmi. So I know if we could bring a ride from the fact that it has a hay at the end.
What was the explanation with both?
With both? That I think that you have to cover. Let me check. I have my safe here. I believe it says that you both have to cover it, and you have to put some water in it. But I can check that up relatively simply.
It says like Shimon Elazar, right? So that was only one of those things.
No, I'm sorry. I apologize. He says the Rishim Elazar said this is the Mashbiach says either you cover it or you put it underneath your bed, and Rabbi Yaakov Barach, the name Rabbi Chia Paskin, that you have to both cover it and put it under your bed. In other words, Rabbi Shimon said either or. Either you cover it or you put it under your bed, and he Paskin that you have to do both. You have to cover it and put it in your bed. In other words, like we have this halacha and other places, Shas, 2 coverings. So he said here that the urine needs 2 coverings as well. Okay? No, it's assuming there's no smell. It's all assuming there's no smell. Just get out of the line of sight. Okay? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan by Yefes B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan gave a very big kula here. So a kosher, if you have a little bit of excrement, mivat lebarok, you can cover it up with saliva. Saliva is a little bit whitish in color. So the saliva can cover again, assuming there's no smell, the saliva can cover the excrement so you can read Shema. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Zira and Rabbi Yaakov Bar Zavdi have a yasmin, they were sitting. Chametz so they saw excrement. Come Rabbi Yaakov Berzavdi, so Rabbi Yaakov Berzavdi got up, Roka Kalani spit in it. Rabbi Zira said that minyama litgina, that's good enough for a short period of time. There's the amount of time it takes to go from the city of Yama to the city of Tigna, according to one interpretation. According to another interpretation, the amount of time it takes to take a fish out of the sea and put it into the frying pan. But eventually what happens to the saliva? It dries up or it sinks into the excrement, and then it doesn't do any good anymore. Tevo Shimalei Svarim. If you have a box full of Svarim, and you have to go to sleep in the room, you put it underneath the head of your bed. Not underneath the foot of your bed, it's not derech eretz. Rabbi Chuna said, you can only put it on the bed if the bed is 10 tefachim high, because then it's considered as if the svarim are in a separate rishus, in a separate domain underneath your bed. And also, the straps which hold up your bed should not touch the aron which holds the svarim. Holy Rabbi Yasa b'mkomed Rabbi Shmuel the Bar Rav Yitzchak, Rabbi Yasa paskin in the place of Rav Shmuel Yitzchak kehada de Rav Chuna, like that which Rav Chuna said. In other words, this whole halach which we just mentioned. Lo yishamesh adam mitaso. A person should not have relations in the Sefer Torah Moabais with a Sefer Torah in the same house, here meaning the same room. Rabbi Yerushalmi Berachos said, the Sefer Torah was covered in a covering in a cloth of some sort, or if it was in a cubby hole, which is 10 tefachim high, so then mutter considered to be either concealed or it's going to be in a separate rishus. Rabbi Shub Levi said, also lo kilon, you have to make before it a curtain. Lo yeshev adam agabi safsol shesefer Torah noson oleh. Your love, you shouldn't sit on a bench on which there's a Sefer Torah. Ma'aser Rabbi Lezer is a Ma'aser Torah which happens to Rabbi Lezer. Shayeshev agabi safsol shesefer Torah noson oleh. He was sitting on a bench on which there was a Sefer Torah, and when he realized it, he jumped up from before it, as somebody who jumps up when they realize that there is a snake right nearby. Now, this is only if it's on the same level. If it's on top of something else, mutter, it's permissible to sit on the same bench as the Sefer Torah. How much higher does the Sefer Torah have to be than that level on which you're sitting? So Rabbi Abishim, Rabbi Chuna said there has to be a tefach of a barrier of a distinction between the Sefer Torah and the level on which you're sitting. So if you have, say, if you were sitting on this table here, so you wouldn't be able to sit on there if there's a Sefer unless it's a tefach high. Not like this, half a tefach high, but actual tefach high. Okay? That's according to one interpretation. According to the other interpretation, we say that Rabbi Yerushalmi Rabbi Zira says afilu koshu. Even if it's just a piece of paper underneath the Sefer Torah, that's sufficient. You can sit on the same level. Okay? Not the same level, but right next to it. So, says the Gemara, we don't have any resolution here. I believe that we generally are makel that even if it's a hefsek koshu, and not by Sefer Torah, that very rarely happens. But by Sfarim, even hefsek koshu, and I've seen, and I haven't looked it up, but I've seen that people are makel if the Sefer is standing. In other words, if you're on a bench and there's a Sefer next to you and it's standing as opposed to lying, so people are makel to sit on the bench. Okay, same thing. Yeah, you stand up, you stand the sitter up. I don't know why that helps, but I've seen that's done.
Exactly the same surface, or let's say you have two benches right next to each other.
No, it has to be exact. If you have two separate benches, then that's okay. It has to be on the same bench or the same bench.
If standing up, the writing is not on the same level as...
The writing, maybe that's it. The writing's on the same level. Could be. I don't know. Could be.
What about Sfarim in a bedroom?
Not supposed to fire in bedroom. Again, the same halach unless you have a kilo. See, our Sfarim are different, right? Theoretically, one can make the case our Sfarim are not Sifrei Torah, so one could be lenient. But generally, the minhag is that if one has Sfarim in a bedroom, then one covers them, or with a curtain or something like that. So that's generally speaking what we do. Says more, Daiski Shumle is for him. If you had a sack full of Sforim, or alternately, you had a sack full of bones, the bones of a dead body. You are permitted to put it on your back, like the hobos used to walk with the rod and with the sack at the end. That's okay. It's not considered to be lack of covet for the Sforim or for the dead bones. V'rochev, and you can ride that way. Tefillin, so to tefillin tolos amirashos samita, you can hang them at the head of your bed. Veina tolos amirashos samita, but not by the foot of your bed. And Rabbi Shmuel, and we have a mice like this. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Avo, and Rabbi Lezer B'Shem B'Chanina all said, Rabbi Ranasi, Haya tolos tefillah, he would hang his tefillin at the head, Berachos Amita, Berachos Amita at the head of his bed. Rabbi Chizkiah said, B'Shem Ravo, Neravo, Ubadlo Yoavid Laho, Yoavid shouldn't, however, do with them, Kardin Daiklaro. Now, I don't know, Daiklaro is obviously some Greek or Roman word. What it means here is that you shouldn't hang them by the strap and have the bias hanging down like a pendant. Right? In a pendant, you have like the charm hanging at the end. You don't do that. You put the bias up high, and you have the straps hanging down. Okay, that's the way to do it. Okay, el tefillin milamal, tefillin high, or retzuos milamaton, and the retzuos hanging down below. Tana, we learned, Rabbi Chalafta ben Shaul said, this is in the Bavli, Otesh b'tfilah, so somebody who sneezes in his davening, siman ra lo, it's a bad sign for him. Hada dat omar, however, that which you said is only milamato if he's passing gas. In other words, sneezing from the other end, from down below. But sneezing from the mouth, low, that's not a problem. Asya Demar, Rabbi Chanina, and this is going like that which Rabbi Chanina said. This mar is Omar, right? Because as we know in the Yerushalmi, very often we drop the aleph. Like that which Rabbi Chanina said, Ani Reisius Levi, I Rabbi Anasi Mifaheku Ma'atesh. He was yawning and sneezing in the middle of davening. What would he do? He would put his hand on his mouth. Avo, even though that's permitted, lo rokek, you're not allowed to spit in the middle of davening. Rabbi Yechomar afilu rokek, you can even spit. Kadeshia koso naki, in order that his cup should be clean. And his cup here means his mouth. In other words, when you praise Hashem, it says you're supposed to do it bepem mole. So therefore, you're allowed to spit in order to clear your mouth. In order your mouth should be ready to praise God properly. That's why why is it called a kos? Various different reasons. The Mashbiach says because kos means lechoseis, means to chew. So the mouth is the chewing organ. Okay?
They don't mean spitting on the floor, they mean spitting into a handkerchief or something.
That we'll get to. Says the Gemara. What? Modern Hebrew. No, Lilos means to move your jaws, but Likoseis means to chew food, to chew, and not all food. To chew like a nut or a hard kernel of grain is called Likoseis, like a cracking type of chewing. Okay, says the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan feel okay to share kosanoki. Lifanav asur. However, not before you. Lacharav mutar, only behind you. Liyamino asur, to your right it's asur because the right is holier. L'smal mutar, to your left is okay. Hadadu chsiv, as it says, yipo mitzitcha elef urevava miminecha. Right? It says on your left hand only 1,000 people will fall. On your right hand 10,000 people will fall. So we see the right is more significant than the left. Right? Everybody agrees that Bahadin de Rokak Itztalin, those who spit into an Itztalin, do Asr. Now, almost all the Mefarshim say, almost everybody says, there's a typo here. That it should say that those who spit into an Itztalah, into a handkerchief, it's mutter. Spitting into a handkerchief is okay. But the Mashbiach, the Pittsburgher, says, it's brilliant, he says, where people are wearing itztalos. An itztalah is a long garment, like a frock or something like that, something which sweeps down to the floor. So what's he saying? What? A kapota. So bekula dahadi, where people are wearing long garments, but then it's also to spit there, even in front of you, even in behind you. Why? Because the long garments are going to sweep the floor and pick up all the spittle. So therefore, in that place, it's also to spit on the floor, even behind you. Okay, that's how he learns. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon Levi Omer, Haroki bebeis hakneses, somebody who spits in a shul, kiroki ba'aseinu, it's as if he's spitting into the pupil of his eye. So it's a repulsive kind of behavior. However, Rabbi Yoina, Rokak, he would spit in shul, v'shayif, and he would rub it into the ground with his foot. And this is what Lubavitchers do. I know many of you dive in Lubavitcher shuls. Other Chassidim do it as well. But by Oleinu, when they say Shem Mishtachavim Lehevel Varik, then they spit on the floor and they rub the spit into the ground. So that's like he's saying that you're allowed to do it if you rub it into the ground afterwards. Okay? Says the Gemara, I'm Rabbi Yossi, Bei Rabbi Avon. Rabbi Yossi said in the house of Rabbi Avon, V'chein HaRokek, so to some is... Did I skip? Oh, sorry. Yirmi and Rabbi Shmuel Bar Chavda said, V'shem Rabbi Ado Bar Achua, Amispalel, the name Rabbi Ado, his brother's son, Amispalel, somebody who's davening, Al Yoruk Ad Shalach Arba Amos. You shouldn't spit until you walk for Amos. In other words, it's not to finish davening and immediately afterwards spit. It's not nice. So you should walk for Amos first, and then spit. Okay? We'll see if you actually have to walk, or it's a time element. Similarly, on Rabbi Yossi Bei Rabbi Avon, vice versa. V'chein rokek, somebody who just spit, shouldn't daven until he's walked for Amos. Tani, we learned, a person finished davening should not urinate until he walks for Amos away. Somebody who just finished urinating, should not daven until he walks for Amos. Rabbi Yaakov Baracha. Rabbi Yaakov Baracha said, Lo sof tover, do not come to the conclusion that it means until he walks for Amos away from where he urinated, because you know what? He urinated here. Maybe where he ends is 4 Amos of walking, somebody urinated there also. So obviously we're not concerned about the urine per se. As far as you're concerned, you'll just cover it. What it means is you should wait the amount of time which it takes to walk for Amos, a second or two, as long as he waited, as long as he waited, the amount of time it takes to walk for Amos, that's sufficient. Rabbi Ami, why is that? Excuse me? He stayed in place. Rabbi Ami, why is that? Rabbi Ami said, why is that true? If you say he has to walk for Amos, also he's forbidden until that. I'd say, well, okay, walk for Amos down the road, maybe somebody else urinated there before him. So therefore it can't be literal. That's to mean the amount of time it takes to walk for Amos. Rabbi Yaakov B'Shem Ravav said, so what? Now we're talking about when excrement loses its din of excrement. And you don't have to stay 4 Amos away from it, and even if it's in your line of sight, you don't have to be concerned about it. By the excrement until it's dry like a bone. Mayim, by urine, as long as they are a little bit moist. You have to distance yourself once the excrement is hard like a bone, or once the urine is no longer moist, you don't have to distance yourself. Geniva said, Ma'im kozman sherishuma nikar. But by the urine, as long as you can tell by looking at the ground, even if it's not moist, that there was urine there, it's forbidden. Shmuel Amar Achikarmu Ponel. Shmuel says by excrement, you have to keep distancing yourself until such time as the excrement has formed a crust, has a crust over the surface. At that point, you no longer have to distance yourself. Shimon Bar Vav, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan said, Ad Shikar Poneh, the same thing until it forms a crust. Rabbi Yirmi and Rabbi Zir B'Shem Rav said, Tzoa afilo asuya ke'etzem, excrement, even if it's already hard like a bone, asura, you have to distance yourself from there. Shmuel Amar ad shikarim poneh, Shmuel says, until it gets hard like a bone, and this is a repetition, so one of them is extra, and the scribe wrote this over twice by mistake. Shimon bar Voah Amar b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Shimon bar Voah says the name Rabbi Yochanan ad shikarim bar poneh. He also says that it's until crossed over. Omer Chizkiah said, Rabbi Abba machmir b'mayim yetzer min hatzor. Rabbi Abba is more machmir by urine than by excrement. So let's look back at what Rabbi Abba said a minute. Rabbi Abba said about 6 lines on top that by tzoa achet yabish ke'etzem, by excrement it's until it gets dry like a bone. By water as long as that's moist. So he says by that long as there's some moisture. So he says the shiur which he gave by water takes longer than it takes for, I shouldn't say it's longer. There's less recognition. In other words, if there's a little bit of moisture, so then that certainly should be considered to be a more advanced stage of decay than when it's hard like a bone. Because when it's hard like a bone, you could still see it was there, right? It's still there. It's just hard. Nonetheless, at that point, you no longer have distance yourself. By urine, that's not enough. By urine, as long as there's some vestige of moisture, you have to distance yourself. That's a much bigger chumrah. So he's more machmir by urine than by excrement.
So by excrement, it's as long as, since it's hard, it became like a different,
right.
Different item.
Don't they have like dunk throwing contests somewhere in the Midwest? Right. What? Couches, right. So he else said it becomes like a hockey puck. It's a different type of the Metzias then, yes. Right. That's right. As long as there's any moisture there. Okay, so says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Manar, Rabbi Manar said, Minhado de Gniva, Minhado de Gniva, and here the Mashbiach says, nobody knew how to interpret the next Rosh Hashanah until he came along. How it should be the next Rosh Hashanah? Minhada Gniva Aleph Lamed. Amarle, right? So the Mashbiach says if you read it like that, it makes no sense. And Taka the Pnei Moshe and everybody else goes crazy trying to explain what it is. So he says that's not the way to open the Rosh Hashanah. The way to understand Rosh Hashanah is Islay. Minhada Gniva Islay. From Afilu Asuya, from that which Gniva said, he holds the same thing, right? Because Gniva said, by water, Kozman Trishuma Nikar. As long as there's an impression which is still left. Well, that sounds like he's also much more machmir by urine than by excrement, right? And from that which Gniva we see, that even if it's like a bone, it's forbidden. I'm sorry. Well, let me change one thing. Mina Ramona said Mina da, from that which Rabbi Chizkiah said that only Rabbi Abba is more machmir by urine than by excrement. We can assume that Gniva, even though he's super machmir by urine, must hold the same parameter by urine as by excrement. Alright, so what did Gniva say? Gniva holds that by the urine there can't be any vestige left. Right? So says the Gemara, min hador di Gniva, min hador, from this we must learn, from the fact that only Rabbi Abba is more machmir by urine than by excrement, that Gvina must hold that the shiur by urine and excrement is the same. If that's the case, it must be the Gniva say Afilu Asuya Ke'etzem Asura. Even if you have excrement which is tough like a bone, it's forbidden. Mivnei Shema Moshe Kayim, because you still have some substance there. Why? Because by mayim, by the urine, he required Ema Moshe Kayim. He required that there be no Roshem Nikar, there be no impression left. So therefore, by Torah, he must also require that be no impression left. That's a much more later stage than when it's dry like a bone. So again, he says, if Rabbi Abba is the only one who's more machmir by urine than by excrement, it must be that Gvina holds that by urine and excrement it's the same shiur. What's that shiur? Once it's obliterated completely, it's not enough that it's dry like a bone. Okay, so if you go to a dunk throwing contest, you're not allowed to say Shema there. Says the Mishnah further. Zav Shirah Keri. Tonight we finish a parak. Zav Shirah Keri. Now it's an interesting halacha. This tevila, which we saw, which they had to do at the time when there was Tumah and Tara, this tevila was not a tevila because of Tumah. This tevila, we said, is that people shouldn't be going around having bad thoughts and having relations in the middle of the day, so therefore they made you, anytime you had an emission, go to the mikveh. So if that's the case, says the Mishnah, Zav Shirah Keri. He's already a Zav. He's much more tummy. He's super tummy. He's a Zav. And now on top of that, he saw Keri. He still has to go to the mikveh before he davens. Why? Because it's a separate halacha, even though it's not going to make him tor. But separate halacha, since he's about Keri, since he had an emission or had relations, he's got to go to the mikveh. Zav Shirah Keri and a Nida. She's super tummy. She's Nida already. But a few days ago she had relations with her husband. And some of the Zera now came out, which is tantamount to a Baal Keri. So if she wants to go daven now, she's got to go to the mikveh. Even though it won't help her for Nida. A Nida shall remain. But from the Keri, she's got to go to the mikveh. And so too, a woman who had relations, this is the other way around. She saw relations and then she came and now Nida afterwards. Tzrichim Tefillah, they all required Tefillah. Again, even though it won't help for the Nida, but it'll help for the Keri. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda says in all these cases they don't need Tefillah. You mean for hygienic reasons? So what? In the old days, they went in rivers and lakes. It would dissipate very quickly. Yeah, they didn't go to they didn't have mikvahs like we have today. Rabbi said this modern concept of mikvah, this is only a 300-year-old thing. They never had this in the old days. What? Yeah, they had a mikvah there because there was no choice. But generally speaking, I'm not saying that it didn't exist. But generally speaking, they went to rivers and springs and lakes, so they wouldn't have this problem. Be a lot of other stuff in rivers and springs and lakes too. Says more. Ad Kedun. Now here, I'm very happy I had the sefer because Yor Sameach explains the sugya very nicely, and I took it from there. Ad Kedun Zav Shirah Keri. This is only until now we learned about a Zav, somebody who was already a Zav, and he saw Keri. Va'afilu Keri Shirah Zav. And even and even vice versa. You were first about Keri, and then he became a Zav. Moil Shu Toivel. I'm sorry, I read it wrong. Until now we heard Zav Shirah Keri. Va'afilu Keri Shirah Zav Moil Shu Toivel. What about the other way around? What about Keri that then became a Zav afterwards? Does it work that he goes to the mikveh? No, should he go to the mikveh again because of the same reason? Yes, says more Nishmina min Adol. We can learn from our Mishnah over here. It says Mishamesh Shirah Sanida. First she saw Keri, meaning she had relations, and then she became a Nida. Shricha Tefillah, she has to go to the mikveh. So it doesn't matter whether the more severe tumah came first, and then the tumah of Keri, or that Keri came first, and then the more severe tumah. Regardless, you want to go daven, you want to go learn, you have to go to the mikveh first. That's all according to the Tana Kama. Rabbi Yehuda Poiter. However, Rabbi Yehuda said you're potter. My Tana Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say you don't have to go to the mikveh in this case? Is it mishum ma moil hu shu toivel? Is it because it doesn't do any good to go to the mikveh? Because he's going to be tummy anyway afterwards. He still is off. Is it because of that? Or is it because there's no concept of Tumah Kala by Tumah Chamura? In other words, the Keri is nothing vis-a-vis the Zov. See, it's like something it pales in comparison.
I understand, but
yeah.
could it be that a person like you have a ritual tumor comes in contact with somehow gets a shame of the tumor?
That's exactly the question. In other words, maybe that's those four, that a ritual tumor, it's a joke to talk about it being also a sheni latuma. So here it's an ova tumor. A zav is an ova tumor. A carry is a lighter tumor. It's also an ova tumor, but it's a lighter tumor. It's a tumor for 1 day. It's a tumor opposed to tumor zav for 7 days. So maybe there's nothing to talk about, says Rabbi Yehuda. And he has the tumor chamura. We're not going to concern with the tumor kala. So that's the Gemara's kash here. Yeah. Yes, as a zavi cat, it's a baal carry which impedes it from davening. Okay, good. No, we're going to discuss that. Says the Gemara. Ma nafik be'mi be'non. What comes out from between the two of them, which is as we ask in the Bavli, l'may nafkamina. Who cares what Rabbi Yehuda's logic is? So says the Gemara. I'll tell you what the nafkamina is. Roa carry. Now this line is unintelligible without the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says, you know what it's talking about? Some case, he's a zav. But he's counted Shiva Nakim. He's counted 7 clean days, which a Zav has to count. Now, on the last day of Shiva Nakim, he sees Keri. Not Ziva, he sees Keri. Oh. So now, here's the Nafkamina. If you hold in Tamer Mambo Yushu Toivel, if you're going to say, what's the point? It's going to mikveh, it's going to remain a Zav anyway. That doesn't apply here. Because after he goes to the mikveh here, he'll be Torah both from Ziva and from Keri. Because Zav he already isn't, because he eats 7 clean days. And Keri's not going to be either, because after he goes to the mikveh, that already makes him Torah from Keri. So if that's the logic of Rabbi Yehuda, in this case you should be Mechayvin to go to the mikveh. However, again, it certainly works in this case. Lays time of the low. There's no reason not to go except double negative here. There's late time lows, no reason not to go unless you'll have the other svara. Mishum she'ain shame l'tuma kale till tuma chamura. Because there's no point in discussing Keri while he's still a zav. In other words, if in this case Rabbi Yehuda patters you, so tremendously lomdish Gemara. You don't usually find this in the Bavli. If in this case, we're on the 7th day, the Zav saw Keri. Rabbi Yehuda patters him for going to the mikveh. It must be because he says, this guy still has the Tumah Chamura, we're concerned with his Tumah Kala. Of course we're not concerned. It must be that that's the logic. Because if the logic was that the Tefillah is not going to work anyway, here it will work. Because here, after he goes to the mikveh, it's going to be Torah both from Zav and from Keri. Because Ziva 7 days are up, and Keri is only a 1 day tumah. It must be if Rabbi Yehuda patters you in this case. It must be because he holds. Where did Rabbana make a takana of tefillah for Keri? Where that was the only tumah which is upon you. Where you had another tumah upon you, which is the tumah of Ziva, they didn't concern themselves with Keri. Lamaisa, if you go to the mikveh now, it'll work for both for Ziva and for Keri. So what? I don't care. I don't look at all, even to begin with, at the Tumah Kala, at the light Tumah where there's a Tumah Chamur involved. It must be that that's Rabbi Yehuda's. Otherwise, again, in this case, there'd be no logic to pater the guy from going to the mikveh.
You're going to go to the mikveh anyway?
What?
After the Ziva.
Yeah, but you can daven before. That's the shaila, whether you can daven before you go to the mikveh. So if you held like the first far Rabbi Yehuda, so he would prevent you from going to the mikveh until you from davening until you went to the mikveh, because this tefillah would work. So say, you know what, this tefillah will work. Go to the mikveh before you daven. But if you're going to hold like the second svara, that there's no discussion of Tumah Kala b'mokum Tumah Chamura, then let him go ahead and daven before he goes to the mikveh. A Zav is not prevented from davening before he goes to the mikveh, and we don't care about the Tumah Kala b'mokum Chamura, so there's no reason for him to go to the mikveh before he davens Mariv, or whatever he's going to do. Okay, it says more, Ad Kedun, now new issue. Ad Kedun, until now we only saw Kshabalo Tumah Kala l'basof. When in our mission we talk about where first came, and the case we just told about more is first came the Tumah Chamura of Zav, and then came the Tumah Kala of Keri. Afilu Baslo Tumah Chamura Basof.
What about in the case where first came the tumah of Keri and then came the tumah chamura of Zav? How do we know in that case also Rabbi Yehuda is not concerned with the Keri? And here it's a bigger chiddush. Because maybe Rabbi Yehuda will only say, we don't care about tumah kala, b'mokum tumah chamura, where he was first had the tumah chamura and then the tumah kala. What about where first he had the tumah kala of Keri and then only afterwards got the tumah chamura of Zav? How do we know that even in that case, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't care about the tumah chamura, about the tumah kala, and he doesn't require you to go to the mikveh? The Nishmina Minado we can learn from our Mishnah as well. Hamishamesh is Shiur Sanida. It says explicitly, a woman who had relations and then saw Nida, Tzricha Tefillah, according to Tanakh, she requires Tefillah for Rabbi Yehuda Poiter. Rabbi Yehuda says Paters. It says she doesn't know the mikveh. And here, which tumah came first? First came the tumah kala. First came the lighter tumah of nida, of tashmish, of relations, which is Keri, and only afterwards came the tumah chamura of nida. Right? Oh, so we see it makes no difference which comes first. Wherever there's a tumah chamura, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make you go to the mikveh for tumah kala. Amra, we said from there, Amra, this tells us, he hadah. It's the same way this way, the same way this way. In other words, it doesn't matter which comes first, the tumah kala or the tumah chamura. Wherever you have a tumah chamura anyway, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make you go to the mikveh for the tumah kala before you daven. Hadron Allah Misha Meso. Have a good evening.